From the International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors, I'm Robert Casares, and this is the Reframe. My guest today is Dr. Robert L. Smith, Executive Director of IAMFC. Dr. Smith is Professor and Chair of the Department of Counseling and Educational Psychology at Texas A&M University-Corpus Christi, and the coordinator of the doctoral program in counselor education. Previously, he served as the 63rd President of the American Counseling Association, and in 2010, he earned the distinction of ACA Fellow. Dr. Smith has worked extensively as a marriage and family therapist, and he shared some of his tried and true approaches to counseling couples.
I really work hard on establishing the relationship and as quickly as possible. You do a lot of joining. You might be talking about innocuous kinds of things early on, which is okay. They're not ready to just start right now into their deepest problem. Then I get into what is it that we all can agree that we're going to work on. Maybe the couple says our communication problem is unbelievable. We've tried to work on it, but there's blaming taking place, blah, 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 so forth. I'll look at a time. I'll ask them, well, how long have you been married? Blah, blah, blah. And I might do one of two things. If they're arguing a lot and I see kind of negative flow between the two, I'll pop a question and they'll often be surprised and say, I'm kind of curious how you two met. Sometimes one of them will say, well, it's been a long time, and so on. I'll keep with it. If you're going to use solution-focused, I'd recommend you have to be tenacious. So I'll keep with, no, I'm kind of serious. How did you meet? I get them, and usually it happens that way. If I get them to go back to the time when they first met, I've got that couple on the right track in terms of changing the thought process. I'm bringing that couple back in vivo to that time when things were great and they first met.
Welcome to the Reframe. Over the next hour, you'll hear Dr. Smith recount his formative educational and clinical experiences. He also discusses his passion for leadership and describes the origins and development of IAMFC. Dr. Smith also offers insights and recommendations for successfully completing the dissertation process.
Just do it. Procrastination, it's a demon. My friend John Carlson, I always asked him, how do you publish so much? He said, Robert, what you've got to do is get out paper and start putting words and sentences on it. You just got to start putting something down. You can't be trying for perfection first time around. Dissertations are going to be reviewed over and over again, and there's going to be rewrites, and have the mentality that the rewrites are essential. Professors are asking you to rewrite because they want a top product.
I began our conversation by asking Dr. Smith to describe what led him to the field of marriage and family counseling.
I thought about this over the years, and really there was nothing at an early age or extensively through high school that seemed to, draw me to this profession. I had minimal experience with our high school counselor. In fact, it wasn't always a great experience, but I remember asking her when I was a senior about college, and she stated, well, there are probably some colleges that you might get into. So the interesting thing, though, was I did not take that to heart. And I know, this is good information for everybody out there listening, that this is an opinion, and I have my own opinion and strong constitution. So I did end up graduating high in my class, and served as senior president. So I had all that behind me, and the other part of that is it was sort of like a challenge, and so I went on to some of the better universities that we have. When I got to college, I really had a great opportunity to work in a dormitory setting, residence halls, as associate director of the dorm. And it was at that point where I began to become aware of issues facing particularly freshmen coming into college, and would certainly listen and talk to them. I wasn't their counselor. I was resident associate, but I became more and more kind of fascinated with the variety of issues and problems and behavior patterns, thinking, thought process of kids in that. I call them kids. They were either 18, 19, 20, 21 age group, and fascinated with what they were going through. And we had all kinds of experiences within that hall, ranging from a student trying to burn down his dorm room and taking a look at that situation and what the issues were, and to typical relationship issues with people in the dorm, and relationship issues that these freshmen, mainly freshmen, had with girlfriends or boyfriends there. So that was an instrumental part in me thinking about a counseling degree. So when I finished the bachelor's program, I went ahead and pursued master's in counseling. This was at Western Michigan University at the time. Great program, and they had an EDS. I had, I don't know why, I had an inclination. Well, I'll go right for the doctorate, but there was none available, and I selected the educational specialist program and started my journey in terms of preparation as a counselor.
So you said initially that there weren't any doctoral programs available. How were you able to locate the doctoral program that you eventually went through?
Okay, that's a good point. I actually explored 3 doctoral programs after I had experience in the field following the educational specialist degree. The 3 programs were selected based upon the individuals, the professionals that were working as faculty members in those programs. And the first program I checked was the University of Wisconsin, and at that time they had the outgoing president of Personnel and Guidance Association, subsequently American Counseling Association, and I talked with the gentleman and had a great conversation. I liked University of Wisconsin, fine doctoral program, and I learned a lot. One of the things he mentioned to me in the middle of our interview was, "Do you see the pile of material that I have on my desk?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you see what's back on my windowsill?" And there was another pile twice the size back there. He said, if you attend University of Wisconsin doctoral program, I'd highly recommend that you stay during the time you write your dissertation." He said, "Those people that have the pile right on my desk, easy access, I'm going to have the opportunity to get to that information right away. Those on the windowsill end up taking a little longer." So I gained a lot just from that interview. The second interview was at Arizona State, and that's when one of our well-known faculty members or professionals, and I'm blanking on the name now, Gilbert Wren. And Gilbert Wren was there. Great conversation. You've read about Dr. Wren, humanistic individual, very good program at Arizona State, and enjoyed that particularly enjoyed the weather, obviously. Third interview was at the University of Michigan, and that was with the incoming president of what is now ACA, and that was with Dr. Gary Walls. The interesting thing about Dr. Walls is that when you go in to talk with him, he was a very busy man, chair of the program, had a lot of doc students and doing a lot of writing. But when you met with him, you closed that door, you were the only person, you felt like you were the only person that he was interested in. And the relationship skills of Gary, are well known and well respected. So I decided on the University of Michigan based upon those three interviews.
Were you impacted in any way by the modeling of those relationship skills? Has that impacted the way in which you conduct yourself as a counselor educator?
Absolutely. The relational skills of listening, responding, focused, not having a mindset somewhere else, all of those that are key in terms of our ability to work with others. That had a tremendous feeling. And it wasn't just Gary that possessed those skills. It really was all three at these distinguished universities.
And so now you've completed your education, your training, you've had tremendous mentors, and you're out in the field doing clinical work. What were those initial years like for you as a novice clinician?
Okay. I had the fortunate opportunity to work as a clinician during the EDS program at Western Michigan University, and those early years, it was all what was called at that time Rogerian counseling, Rogerian therapy. That moved to client-centered, personal. We were all trained as Rogerians, and with Carl, not with, but following Carl Rogers' work. And those first years, it was building relationships, responding, really sometimes, unfortunately, trying to act like Dr. Rogers. And so I would say at that time, still seemed effective in a way, but not to the degree that I would have liked. Also, I had experience in working at a community college in the counseling center, as well as teaching psychology. And that was, again, being a young, naive counselor. I look back and realize that I missed a number of things that I should have been aware of as a counselor. I'll give you one example. Jeffrey Kotler wrote a book called Duped, and he asked some of us that had clinical experience to share a situation where they were duped by their clients or client. And I can remember vividly working with this young man that came in, and we had a number of sessions. It was he didn't get in depth into much, except that he did say he was depressed at times, not serious, but would get lonely and this type of thing. And he talked about his father pushing him into a business degree and seemed to kind of go on and on about that. Well, I didn't feel like the sessions were going anywhere. And then an interesting thing happened. Here we are sitting in the room, and he's across from me, and I had some colorful portraits in the room, and I had a red couch, and he started hallucinating in terms of, look at the glow of that, the brightness of this, the movement in terms of these wonderful lights and colors. Well, I came to the conclusion that he actually was on LSD. And more than that, he really wasn't in the community college anymore. He gained access to entering the college because he was in counseling with me. And in fact, he wanted access because he was attempting to distribute drugs on campus. So it was a early learning experience in terms of observation, things to look for. And yes, in this case, I was really duped by this person.
Yeah, it sounds like there's kind of a conflict between that non-judgmental, empathetic, stance of unconditional positive regard, and then someone who really is trying to pull one over on you. How did you broach that challenging issue with that, I'm using finger quotes, student?
Well, he went to the I asked him about his courses then, and started thinking, well, he's probably not even in school, and I think I first went to the director of the counseling center, and we talked about it, and then the director actually took it from there. Once we had it, and the student eventually was not allowed on campus, and I don't know if anything came of his attempts to distribute drugs or sell drugs on campus. That was out of my hands once I reported it to the director in upper administration.
Did that have any long-term effects on the way in which you interact with clients? Did you take a more suspicious perspective on what was being presented to you?
Well, probably, but more so, the long-term effects was to learn more about use of substance, response to substance, better analysis skills, better observation skills, and to fine-tune those. No, I didn't feel like everybody's coming in and they're going to dupe me. I just said, I got to step my game up in terms of knowledge about some of the issues that could be presented to me, but they're not right up front immediately. And this is what it's also been helpful to is working with couples in terms of clinical work, where couples will come into counseling, and the reason for coming in seldom, I've noticed, is the real reason for entering counseling or therapy. And oftentimes you'll have a couple where one person comes in really for counseling and therapy, and the other person and wants to make the marriage work, and the other person is coming in as a token to the partner, and that really they're on their way out and their interest is leaving the relationship.
Well, when you kind of assess and identify that dynamic, how do you broach that issue with, say, the partner who isn't so interested or doesn't have the buy-in for the counseling process?
I've learned how to be patient on these things, and that is continue to explore where they are with each other, the communication that goes on, and get to the point of where the relationship is such, and the relationship is not just developed in 1 or 2 sessions. It is something that's built upon. But when the relationship is there, where openness between me and the couple, they trust me, we care about each other, where I can be very direct and frankly say, you know what, this is what I've observed during our time together now. And I can go ahead and bring it out in the open. You know, Jeff, you're here, but you don't seem to be here. You seem like you would rather be somewhere else. Are you really interested in this relationship working? And with, we'll call her Margie, you're working hard on this, but I'm kind of interested in where you see your partner now. And so I bring it out there, but only when when it's possible. That's why I say patience is very important on this. It takes time to build that up where you can deal with just about anything as long as it's within ethical boundaries.
Yeah, as you acknowledge, it takes some time to build that rapport where you can be so direct and maybe give a bit more pointed feedback. Do you have any pointers for those challenging situations a clinician might encounter where it's a first session and it's unclear whether or not there's going to be a second or a fifth or a 10th session to be more direct? How do you cultivate that buy-in for a partner who maybe isn't that invested?
Okay. First of all is do some cognitive changes in relationship to worrying and being anxious about a couple or a family coming back to counseling. I know that's a common thought process of new counselors. We see that in students involved in practicum here and internships, very worried about, how they're doing, self-evaluation, and that if there's some way you can stop that, some way you can check your thought process, whether you just have to use some basic techniques of stop it and try to get away from self-evaluation and fear of, well, I'm not doing the job. I don't think this couple's coming back, and it would just be awful. And catastrophizing, as Albert Ellis would say, catastrophizing if the couple doesn't come back. The truth of the matter is, it's very seldom the counselor that's the issue with a couple coming back. There's been research on this. Most of the reasons are external to the counselor, even the novice counselor. A lot of it relates to time commitments. Oftentimes you got a dual career couple you're working with. A lot of it relates to child care. A lot of it relates to finances. A lot of it relates to their own motivation. Yes, there's a part that the counselor plays, but it might not be as significant apart as one thinks. Here's what I do. I've been guilty about, wondering if this couple's going to come back. So here's how I operate. I really work hard on establishing the relationship and as quickly as possible. As Mnuchin says, you do a lot of joining. You might be talking about innocuous kinds of things early on, which is okay. They're not ready to just start right now into their deepest problem. So that's okay, but you can't spend the whole session doing that. Then I get into what is it that we all can agree that we're going to work on. They have to have a particular goal in mind. The problem is when most couples come in, their real goal is not the goal that they tell you about. And sometimes you have to ask over and over again. There's some research that shows that by the third time that you check the goal, you end up with the real goal in terms of why they're there for therapy. So once that's established, then if it's not at a crisis point, and if they're not just arguing, fighting with each other, which you don't get as much as people expect, if it's not there, then I try to jumpstart this road to a better communication, an engaging relationship, by using a number of solution-focused brief therapy techniques. And it might be the exception question. Maybe the couple says our communication problem is unbelievable. We've tried to work on it, but there's blaming taking place, blah, 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 so forth. I'll look at a time. I'll ask them, well, how long have you been married now, blah, blah, blah. And I might do one of two things. If they're arguing a lot and I see kind of negative flow between the two, I'll pop a question and they'll often be surprised and say, I'm kind of curious how you two met. Sometimes one of them will say, well, it's been a long time and so on. I'll keep with it. If you're going to use solution-focused, I'd recommend you have to be tenacious. So I'll keep with, no, I'm kind of serious. How did you meet? If I get them, and usually it happens that way, if I get them to go back to the time when they first met, I've got that couple on the right track in terms of changing the thought process. So they tell me about a time they met. Maybe it was like my wife and I met on a beach, and I say, oh, that's neat. What did you guys talk about? Talking about that. What attracted you to him? Well, he had this great smile, or he was a good listener, and all this kind of stuff. What attracted you to her? Well, she was also very funny, and I just liked the way she looked. I liked her nonverbals and so forth. Well, what else did you talk about then? Well, we talked about our families and so forth. And then what happened? Well, we went on a date and so forth. Where'd you go? So I'm really embellishing that situation. And Rob, you know what's happening? I'm bringing that couple back in vivo to that time when things were great and they first met. Now, this is for new people working with couples. If you do something like this, in the sessions, it's coming up to an hour and a half or however long you meet with a couple. It's coming close to closing. If you do something like this, don't ruin it at the end. By that I mean, don't allow one of the partners here to say, well, that was a long time ago, but she's still blaming me all the time, and what do I do in those cases? Do I say, okay, well, tell me the time that she's blaming it? No, absolutely not. I'm not going to go there. We've worked on a framework here. I'm gonna minimize that. I'm gonna just say, yeah, okay. But, let's go back to when you met. What kinds of things worked for you? I get them back on track, get back on track. So I close the session eventually with, I know this, and this worked for you when you guys first met. So it's obvious that you have the opportunity, or you can have an interesting and fascinating relationship. I would like for you to go back and do some of the things. You could even go to some of the places where you went during that time when things were great and you guys first met. That's how I end something like this with a challenging couple. Now, if they don't come back, here's how I feel about it. I did just about everything that I could. I might throw some CBT in there and so forth, depending on the time we have. But my philosophy is I'm going to do everything I can to help this couple manage now and go forward. And so they're getting something out of this session right now, just in case something happens that they don't come back.
The way you characterize that situation is that it's both incredibly challenging and incredibly rewarding. And it makes me think of last week I was asked to give a guest lecture in a class on couples counseling. And so many of the responses were, oh, that scares me, or I don't know if I could do that. But certainly you've enjoyed it and you've been successful at it. What might you say to upcoming novice counselors or students who may be hesitant to enter the field of couples counseling?
Experience. It's very similar to individuals going into teaching and individuals in counselor ed programs that are wanting to be professors, about getting in front of the class and presenting to the class. You practice it, you do it over and over again, and obviously that changes. So we have a master's program in emphasizing marriage, couple, family counseling. We try to get individuals in role-playing situations where they're no longer just working with an individual in counseling, but they're working with a couple. Then I have them work with a family. So it's all role-playing, but it's using real cases. So they're scared to do that to begin with. Well, repetition over and over again has a tendency to change that. So then by the time they get into practicum, if they do that in several courses, by the time they get into practicum where they're meeting a real couple facing real problems, that whole fear of, how am I going to work when there's more than one person in the room with this couple and they might be arguing all the time. Well, they already went through mock interviews and sessions where their colleagues were arguing and playing the role of a couple. They've already been through that. And the thing is, repetition is key. Watching others demonstrate, working with couples and families is very important. We've got a lot of people with IAMFC that are terrific clinicians, and many of those have videos available. Try to get as close to the actual event of working with a real couple, real problems in a family. I always say this to students that are concerned about working with a couple, that I've noticed during my career that in many ways it's more comfortable and certainly more exciting and intriguing in working with a full family and a couple as compared to working with an individual. And students will ask, what do you mean by that? Well, with an individual, you are depending on that other person to come up with solutions, work on things, just that one person. With a couple, you've got two people. You've got much more to work with. And you're always working on a relationship, you know that. So you've got more. With a family, just think of the rich information that takes place within that family system, where everybody in that family gets a chance to talk. And the truth is, once students experience that, they come back and say, you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's difficult to keep up with everything that's being said. Whereas with an individual, if you have a non-talkative or a very quiet, non-self-disclosing individual, you're basically stuck with that. Usually in a family, you don't have everybody that's withdrawn. You'll get such a neat variety. So, well, there's some of the things that I try to get across, and I believe a lot of it works. I've seen it work.
You've highlighted your extensive experience working with families, and you've definitely conveyed your passion for those various approaches. A lot of the work that you've done over the past couple decades has been with IAMFC as one of the co-founders and current executive director. What were the motivations or origins for you initiating that endeavor?
I've just had some great experiences. I'm blessed in terms of that. When I went from serving as the associate director of ERIC and working with Gary Walls after graduation for a couple of years as a visiting professor, my goal was to get to a warmer climate. I grew up by Lake Superior in upper Michigan, and Ann Arbor still was too cold for me, and so I ended up at a small university in East Texas called East Texas State University at that time. We had a number of individuals very well trained in family therapy. Many of them went on to serve as presidents of AAMFT, which was the only organization that was in existence for individuals that wanted to work with couples and families. The issue was ACA folks, many working with couples and families, were less interested in belonging to AAMFT and really spoke up in meetings and at conferences about the need for a home for them, to learn more about couples and families, to be able to network, to be able to see more presentations about and demonstrations about working with couples and families. So at about that time, and we're talking quite a few years ago, 1980s, some petitions were circulated by myself, by Tom Sweeney, by Martin Ritchie, and by Don W. Locke. So there were several petitions out to ACA members distributed at conferences in terms of eventually starting a division within the association in the marriage and family work. So the need was a propelling agent, and the belief in terms of its importance for our members. Those were motivating factors. I happened to come along at the right time. Dr. Ritchie and Dr. Sweeney approached me about leading this charge that would move towards first organizational status. So they sent me the numbers that we had on a petition, which numbers they had on their petition, which was 173. We needed 300 to get approved by ACA. And the interesting thing is, I had a tremendous graduate assistant named Lynn Miller. I was working at University of Colorado, Denver, and Lynn was my graduate assistant. Subsequently, she went on to finish her doctorate and then worked at University of British Columbia for a number of years and is now a retired professor there. Lynn and I took that petition numbers, and we were able to garner the 300 names that were required, most of them from Colorado. And in fact, we bought membership. It was only like $10 or so. We bought membership in terms of that petition to get there, and then we moved from there to gathering more petitioners, I guess you could say, so we could get to division status, which we needed, like, I think at 500 or so at that time. So we got there, and it kind of all started with working with some of my colleagues at East Texas State, being more involved in marriage and family work, and seeing what was available. I was an early member of AAMFT and clinical member and approved supervisor, but realized our parent organization really had a responsibility to meet the needs of our members who are interested in systems work with couples and families, and it's been a big success story. It was in 1990 that we became a division, and we grew from 1990 from about 1,200 to, in 1995 we had over 8,000 members. We don't have that number right now. There have been changes in terms of the operational structure of ACA, where you don't have to indicate a division in terms of when enrolling in ACA. So all the memberships have dropped of the divisions, including IAMFC. But I consider us still a very healthy division, putting out a tremendous journal, and conferences are terrific. Interactions, committee membership, recruitment of emerging leaders. That's all in place, which is keeps us strong yet at this point.
Well, you used the word earlier, tenacious, about what's required of a couples counselor, and it sounds like you've been incredibly tenacious in promoting the work of couples and family counseling. When you initiated or co-founded the association, and then, these many years later, what were some of those first goals that you set out to achieve that you look back on fondly and say that you're proud to have accomplished them?
Okay, it just so happens that I have our strategic plan outline with goals of IAMFC from 1995. Okay.
Wow.
And our goals at that time first involved membership. We had a goal of 15,000 to 20,000 members back in 1995. You got to realize we were the fastest growing behavioral science organization in the country when we moved from that 1,200 to 8,000. So that seemed like a realistic goal. Obviously, it hasn't been met. Our goal was the establishment of IAMFC's place in the marketplace in terms of marriage and family therapy. We have done that. To establish oneself, you need training standards. IAMFC developed the initial training standards for CACREP for marriage, couple, and family counseling. Recognized by state and federal agencies. We are recognized by state and federal agencies, and having a licensure and credentialing recognition. We have a licensure. I wouldn't say it's just our licensure, but there's LMFTs licensed across the states, and IAMFC is a part of that yet, and our graduates from marriage and family counseling programs at the master's level have a very good entree into becoming licensed marriage and family therapists. So that's there. Quality publications. I titled our journal the Family Journal, and Dr. John Carlson is the founding editor and first editor of that journal, and did a tremendous job for years. And he has not too long ago passed away, but John was just phenomenal. We had network and committee developments as one of our goals, and that's been done. Financial-based development, stabilize. We're stabilized. We're like any nonprofit. We get along with our budget from year to year, but the only way we could increase budget and do more is increase in membership and training and mentorship services. So those were the goals back in 95, and those have been expanded a little bit over time. We are doing much more at the international level. You're probably well aware that our conferences in Oxford, annual conferences there, and we also have conferences in a number of international countries, and that keeps on expanding. So that's been kind of an update of where we're going in terms of our association.
Well, as you reflect on the current state of the profession, what do you assess as the greatest or most pressing area of need that you feel like IMFC can address or you would hope to get involved with?
Our profession is moving into evidence-based practices, more of on the scientific side, and I see that continuing. More distance counseling, online programs, obviously, in terms of training. I think it's not only moving towards more scientific and technology and so forth, but I think and I hope that it's also continually supporting the humanistic side, which is the foundational side of what we are all about as counselors. That is, we know the relationship is the key to making change. All the research documents that, going all the way back to Kharkov's work and the importance of the core conditions in terms of empathy, genuineness, concreteness, congruence, in relationship to working with people. And then the text Heart and Soul of Therapy by Miller, Hubble, and I forgot Miller, Duncan, and Hubble, stressing that a minimum of a third of the outcome is in counseling and therapy is based upon the relationship. Other publications have cited as much as 80%. So as we move forward in more of a scientific realm, an evidence-based realm, let's continue reminding ourselves of the importance of the humanistic part, the relationship. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter if you're, have the greatest technological support, or you're the best person using CBT or DBT. Without the relationship, you're pretty much sunk. So I would see us and hope that we would move in both of these directions. The biggest issue related to specific LPCs is, of course, portability. We have a number of licensed professional counselors that have wanted to seamlessly move from one state to another after they were completely licensed in their state of origin, and have no ethical grievances, issues related to their work. That we need to help them move across the country and gain employment and be able to use their craft in another state. So that's the biggest thing going on in terms of our membership, whether it's ACA members or whether it's ACA and IAMFC members or mental health members. That portability is what we need to work, and I think that'll happen. It's similar to when we worked with licensure, getting LPCs. Nobody thought we would move that quickly to get every state licensed, having a licensure board licensing professional counselors, and it happened actually pretty fast.
Well, I'd like to go back to what you said about relationships. It's been very clear that relationships have been instrumental in your own personal development and growth as a clinician and a professional, but also the counselor's relationship with clients or couples are so vital to the success of that process. Looking at the profession as a whole and the association or the division in particular, what types of relationships would you hope to cultivate with novice counselors or emerging professionals?
I'd like to set up networks with at least the accredited marriage, couple, and family programs accredited by CACREP, and work with those students that are interested in see a career path as someone working with couples and families. And I think there are a lot of those individuals out there. And including that network, the faculty members that are working with these students, some would be coordinators of the marriage, couple, and family program. I think that network is essential in terms of bringing new emerging leaders into IAMFC. And I think we can do that. I know we can do it. It takes time, but that would be a main strategy that I would certainly be a part of as executive director. So the other thing is, find ways to bring in our emerging leaders to our annual conference in New Orleans, and to meet with our emerging leaders at the national conference. And on a structural level, we need to look at ways of collaborating between divisions and collaborating with divisions and ACA headquarters. That was my theme as president of ACA, and I think we've moved in some pretty good directions. However, I think there's probably more that can be done, and sometimes it's a matter of time and a matter of convenience. We all have positions. Everything is voluntary with IAMFC, including the executive director position. But we somehow need to, figure out ways that we can all thrive together and offer the best services to our members, whether they be ACA members only, or whether they be IAMFC members only, or whether they be NCDA members only. So collaboration, I think, is a key word to keep in mind if we are going to thrive as organizations.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing your perspective and your insights on what you hope for the future of the association. And as we kind of come up on our time, I'd be remiss to not ask you about another area of your expertise that relates to another massive undertaking, which is the writing of a dissertation. I know that looking through your CV, you've chaired over 80 dissertations, been on committees for much more, and you've also co-authored a book called The Counselor's Guide to the Dissertation Process. And I was really curious as I think about some friends or former classmates of mine who are in the process of writing a dissertation or thinking about beginning. In all of your experience, what are some of the qualities of students who've just been incredibly successful at managing their time and completing the dissertation?
And understanding that the completion of the dissertation and the completion of the degree has to be your highest priority. And I realize that is a challenge to many individuals. When I was going through the program, we had a child, and then during the program, a second child. So, fortunately, with a supportive wife and friends, I was able to prioritize. I hope that's the case for others in this situation. We have a number of single moms going through a doc program. And I tell them the same thing and realize that, man, it is difficult to do this. But remember this, your faculty members are there to support you, to help you move along, to work with you. So always communicate, obviously, with your dissertation chair and members on your committee. Keep that in mind. If there's something going on, they're not going to be your therapist, but if there's something going on, let them know so you both can kind of work with it and proceed. So prioritizing is a key. Now, as far as the dissertation, select your topic carefully and talk to a lot of people. Do the research with all the browsers. Everything is available now to people online. I mean, we're in a great situation. You can be at your home, you can pick up everything. I used to have to go to the library and thumb through books and journal articles in terms of potential topics and this type of thing, but that was then. Today, you have the opportunity to research so many terrific things. However, you must have a passion for what it is you want to study, what it is you want to research, because that's what will bring you through this. Because a dissertation can be daunting, and it can become, there are many repetitious parts to a traditional dissertation. You need that motivation and that passion to complete that. The other some specific things on completing a dissertation is, again, getting the feedback from your chair and so forth in all aspects of your study. Sample is huge. It's the same goes. No sample, no study. People use a G-power to see what their sample size is. Be sure to do that, so you're not wasting your time and getting to the point where, well, you don't have enough data. Again, time management is key. How do I work on that? I've got a wonderful support system in Susan, my wife, and she allows me to, I can't say the word allows, but she supports me in terms of working late on projects, coming in the office on weekends as need be, and working through that. And so hopefully you have your support system in place, and you can manage your time and set times available where you can work on, where you'll be able to work on your dissertation. And with a dissertation, you need blocks of time. It's not like, you're going to sit down and spend 15 minutes there and 20 minutes here and this. It gets away from you if you just do that. You'll make a lot more progress if you just put large blocks of time on this, on your study. So, I like to follow what a famous lady said in terms of things like completing a dissertation, and that is, just do it. Just do it. Procrastination, it's a demon, and realize that. And sometimes it just takes a mental set to just sit yourself and put, if it's just one word on paper, you start with that one word, and My friend John Carlson, who I always asked him, how do you publish so much? He said, Robert, what you've got to do is get out paper and start putting words and sentences on it that relate to what you're studying. You just got to start putting something down. You can't be trying for perfection first time around. Dissertations are going to be reviewed over and over again by each chapter, and there's going to be rewrites, and have the mentality that the rewrites are essential. Professors are asking you to rewrite because they want a top product. They want standards to be held. It's just like an article that has to be rewritten. You just do it if you want the article to be published. You just do it if you want the dissertation to be completed.
You said that procrastination is a demon. I think another demon of that process is comparisons. And the best piece of advice, when I look back on that time from my life, that I received from a committee member is to avoid the trap of comparing my progress or my process to that of my classmates, that just because they're freaking out doesn't mean that I need to be freaking out, or just because they're further on doesn't mean that I'm at a disadvantage because maybe I haven't made as much progress. Have you witnessed comparisons serving as an impediment to your students' progress with the dissertation?
Yeah, that's a good point, Rob. We have a cohort system. We take in 10 doc students once a year in the fall. And with that system where they're taking the same classes together throughout the program, it's sort of at times a built-in comparison phenomenon. And so I see that, and all of us as faculty members tell our doc students in the cohorts, this is not a contest. Everybody does it at their own pace. We try to get everybody through during a certain time period. However, dissertations differ, situations differ, and please keep in mind that you're competing with yourself is all. You're trying to develop the best product. You've got help from your faculty, and you certainly so our students support each other, and that's what we emphasize in terms of this. When we select our doc students, that's one of the things we look for in terms of, we want them to be competitive, but we want to see if they have the support skills, mentality, relational skills to work well with other individuals in their cohort. So some of that is mitigated by our screening process, but there still is, as you mentioned, kind of that competitiveness that pops up. And sometimes it's done just in humor, but it's there.
Well, I want to thank you not just for sharing your insights, but especially for your time today. So as we conclude, I would really love to hear you describe a time in your life where maybe the way in which you thought about something or your self-talk or your experiences weren't incredibly helpful, and you just needed to reframe and change your way of thinking about them in a way that was positive and a bit more productive.
I have a number of those that could talk. I know we're out of time, so I'll pick one that relates to our wonderful organization, IAMFC. When we were in the process of getting names on a petition, we would distribute the petitions at conferences along with an outline, a narrative in terms of what IAMFC is and what it could be. Would you be interested in signing up and supporting us as a eventual division? Well, at several conferences we noticed this: our material was gone. It kind of disappeared, and Martin and I would look at each other and say, "Wow, that's pretty good. Maybe a lot of people have picked up that, and they're going to send these petitions back to us and so forth." But then we realized that every place we put something, those petitions were gone. So went to a restroom and we found all of our petitions stuffed in a wastebasket in the restroom. Well, at that time, we realized there were other organizations, divisions in ACA that really didn't want another division established, and this was their way of responding to our work. So we both got mad, said a few unkind words toward the other divisions and some of the individuals, and I think we both had to reframe the situation and reframe that. Well, we can get more petitions, not a problem. Rather than them being kind of like the enemy and negative towards us, they're just basically afraid of losing their members. And you know what? There's room for all of us. So we could have stayed mad, but looking at it from a different perspective, basically trying to understand where they're coming from. And a reframe has to have some degree of reality to it, and certainly there's a good degree of reality to that. Yeah, I understand, and they'll be welcoming us. There's plenty of room for more divisions, and they will also like us once they get to know us. And you know what? That actually happened.
The Reframe is a production of the International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review the show in Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. Join me next month on The Reframe.